Hi guys, I'm Kendall.
And I'm Glenn.
And we're traveling around Australia in our 1982 VW T3 named Vance.
Oh! Way to go, Kendall. We've been living on the road now for about 6 months and thought it was time we'd do a little pros and cons list as to why you may or may not want to live in a vintage van just like Vance.
Before we kick things off, we'll just give a little bit of a backstory as to how we actually got Vance in the first place. We were living and working full-time in Sydney, and we decided that we wanted to get out of the city on the weekends and actually see more of the country as much as we could in a weekend anyway, and the perfect way to do that was through a van. And at first we didn't set our minds on a vintage van or a VW van by any means. I think, yeah.
I'd researched so much about it. We were generally going down the pathway of like the Ford Transit or like the Mercedes Sprinter vans. I'd made floor plans specifically for like a medium wheelbase Ford Transit, tall roof, looking, researching, and then we were just like, well, we'll have a look at some like older ones as well. And then, I mean, we came across Vance on Marketplace, had a look, and within a few days bought him, which went against everything I'd researched. We'd both researched for like 2 or 3 months before it. But here we are.
So this video will be all about the pros and cons of owning a vintage van, so a much older van, I guess, as opposed to a Sprinter or a newer type of van similar to this style.
Yeah, we definitely can't compare apples with oranges with all the different kinds of like camper vans, camper trailers. As far as we're concerned, there's only 2 real ways that we would like to travel, particularly Australia. Would be either forward driving, like our really good friends Chris and Ange, who are The Outfit. They've got an amazing channel, definitely worth checking out. It certainly makes us jealous when we're watching their videos because it sort of dangles that carrot as to what it would be like if we did have a four-wheel drive and did have the ability to go off-roading and forward driving, which I guess leads us to our first con, which is the fact that vans can't go everywhere. And in a country like Australia, there's so many amazing like beaches you can four-wheel drive on and so many really nice four-wheel drive tracks to see some beautiful parts of the country that sadly we won't be able to.
A lot of newer vans probably could, but the fact that Vance is so old, it makes us a lot more skeptical to take him down some roads just because you never know when he's just going to fall down.
Yeah, which leads us to our second con, which is so many mechanical issues. He's an old fella with a fair bit of rust. Well, he's been pretty well looked after, but there's always going to be rust, particularly being a beach van. But as I've said in previous videos, we have had a lot of mechanical issues, and that's even with us being pretty particular taking him to Volkswagen specialists as well. Just know that if you are going to get a vintage van, you're definitely going to have more things to worry about mechanically and structurally and all that jazz. But at the same time, I mean, you can buy a brand new van. At the end of the day, you're taking it across country and you're living in it. There's going to be so many expenses along the way regardless. It's just you're more likely to have more of them and more frequently, which makes things very interesting on the road. It also makes it harder as well because it is an older van. Some mechanics don't even really want to touch them because it is old, or parts are harder to source as well. So far we haven't had too much trouble with that. Along the east coast of Australia, there's plenty of people that are happy to work with them and are somewhat specialists, which is good. However, now being a little bit more removed, it might be a bit more difficult, but hopefully we've spent the coin on the coast so that it doesn't happen here.
But the silver lining to that, and I think anyone who owns some type of vintage vehicle of any type, is that you really do take every day slowly, but you do appreciate every time that that car turns on. So.
And lasts a big trip.
Yeah, like, so we've just made it all the way to the Northern Territory without any issues. And that is so amazing, so it makes the trip that much better because we didn't have any issues. So there is a little silver lining to it.
Yeah, give Vance a little pat on the dash.
Yeah.
Did a good job. He did well today. Last week, he's done very well for us. So yeah, you definitely appreciate the little things a bit more. But it does come with some interesting tales along the way, which become laughable stories now that we look back on them, but at the time they can be pretty stressful.
The third con is the fact that most vintage vans have no air conditioning, no heating of any kind.
No.
There's no silver lining to that. It just
sucks. Today, even more so than ever. But it's just windows down, 100, and that's about it. That's the best you're gonna get.
Yeah, we've resorted to wetting towels and putting them on our face while we drive, so that's just all part of it.
That's all part of it. It's funny. But if you look at it on paper, it's not the most glamorous way to travel.
But I guess it's how it was back in the day before any of that was even really an option.
Yeah.
We're really taking it old school here.
Yeah, very much so. The fourth con is just how slow Vance drives. So he's obviously not breaking any land speed records, as with most vintage vehicles, but it's really taught us to take things slowly on the road and really just take in our surroundings and not be in a rush. We've definitely gained so much more patience since owning Vance, and it's been a really cool silver linings in it all. It's obviously not the best if you're trying to have a rush to get anywhere, but it was never really our intention to rush anywhere on this trip, and it was just the whole point was just to take things slow and really enjoy the journey, which it has been great, and that's definitely can be viewed both ways. For us, we enjoy it, but for a lot of other people it might be a negative as well.
Yeah, I'm from California, and if you're driving the speed limit on the freeway, you're driving too slow. So it was a big adjustment for me.
A little different in old Vans.
Now we just have cars and vans just continually passing us.
All the time.
It's like, goodbye.
All the time. The last 5 days I've been driving non-stop, and I think we passed one vehicle.
Yeah, that was exciting.
What a rush.
Big deal.
What a rush. And the final con is just the fact that vintage vans generally are quite small. So compared to your really big cargo vans, there's far less room. I mean, there are people living and working full time out of vans that look like studio apartments that are unbelievable, which are so cool. But I mean, this is just so small in terms of storage. It's not even a double bed that we have in there either. Which you get used to very quickly, surprisingly. That was one thing I thought was going to be harder to adjust to. But we just have such limited space.
But in saying that, it does...
Right,
But in saying that, it does, I guess, force you to live very simply. I think if you're even considering doing this type of lifestyle, you're doing it because you want to live a much simpler life, and the smaller you go, the more simple you have to live, I suppose. We really have to think, is there a purpose behind this item that we have in the van? Do we need another jacket? Is it really necessary? So I think that's, it's been an important life skill, I suppose, that we'll take further along beyond our trip.
Yeah, we realize we need so little in the way of belongings to be like genuinely happy and be able to travel still, which has been cool. I mean, no matter what, even going down to any van, no matter how big, is still obviously a big cutback, and that's awesome. It's living very minimally, but you're always going to feel that space, like no matter what. So starting being so small, it's been a pretty eye-opening experience as to how little we need.
But the flip side to that is that because he's small, we can pretty much treat him like a car. So if we're in cities, it's very easy just to maneuver around. We can park in pretty much any parking spot that's not not
too tall, but even then, it really is it's awesome. I don't know how people with big rigs or trailers deal with it, which is why this is our first pro. There are pros, believe it or not. Vance is small, so he fits in little spots, which is great. Like, we can swing by grocery stores, shopping centers, anything like that. Particularly, like, you can basically go anywhere except low roof car parks.
Yeah.
Which makes life so much easier when you're going through towns. Obviously when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter, and like we've said, how cool it'd be to have like a massive bus or like a big setup. But considering the first 6 months of our trip, we're on the east coast of Australia, going through coastal town after coastal town, it would be a nightmare, I think, dealing with. I mean, everyone obviously is fine with it, but we just love the ability to be able to go into any parking spot, no matter what, be able to do a quick U-turn or 3-point turn, reverse, do whatever we want comfortably, because it's basically just like a car.
Birds and flies. Welcome to the outback.
Yeah. Yeah, gotta get peace and quiet out of here.
The second pro would be that owning any type of vintage van, it's somewhat of a conversation starter, I'd say. We've met a lot of really cool people just because they've come up and said that they like vans and they want to check them out. And either they've owned a van similar to that in the past, or they just like it in general. So it's sort of like if you have a dog on the road, it's just an easier way to meet people.
Yeah, it's been cool.
Yeah. And then the third pro would be that vintage cars are probably the only type of vehicle that actually increases in value over time. So we don't actually plan on selling vans, but if we wanted to, we would probably get a pretty big return on our investment, which is not the norm for any type of car, especially if it's a van that you're living in and traveling long distances. So that is something to consider, that even though you might put a lot of money into it, you might actually get a lot of money out of it as well if you do intend to sell it.
And we have spoken to a number of people that have owned particularly T3s before, and every single one of them has regretted selling it. And they just love the whole idea of it, which is another sort of encouragement. We never planned on selling vans anyway, but it's nice to hear it as well, to be like, yeah, we're going to hold on to him and look after him. But yeah, it is definitely a positive if you are looking to resell. Generally, if you do it smartly, you'll end up getting a pretty good return on it as well.
And that leads us to our final pro, which is just the general charm of owning an old van or an old car in general. You can't really put a price on it. It's just, there's something so amazing. If you know, you know. Yeah, if you know, you know. It's just the little like waves we get when we see another Combi or another VW on the road, and it's just, there's just such a charm about it. I love it.
Yeah, and I think even more so the fact like of living in it as well. It's almost like we're going back to the time when it was 1982 and they were just traveling so simply, and it's just such like a pure way to do it, and that was always what we loved about the idea of van life.
So to wrap things up, for cons we have that you can't necessarily take it on many dirt roads. The mechanical issues can be a big one because you never really know exactly what you're getting when you're buying an old car. The third is that there's no aircon or heating, which just flat out sucks. The fourth is that we travel very slowly, and then the last one is that it's just small.
Yeah, which takes us to our pros, which is it's small. That's a double-edged sword depending on how you look at it. It increases in value over time. If you play it right and you hold on to it long enough, you'll end up getting your money back or more. Third one is it's a conversation starter, which is just like a fun little perk of it. I mean, logistically, it's not the most official pro, but it is definitely something that we decided to count in for our little pros and against list. And finally, with probably the biggest one, is just the overall charm in owning a vintage vehicle. We absolutely love vans. We'll see them at a distance, or we'll even watch like drone footage of them and be like, oh, vans! Something about it. I think anyone that owns a vintage vehicle will understand. But hopefully this sheds a little bit of light on what the pros and cons may be if you're thinking about buying an older or newer van to live in. And I think one big point I want to say is that if we bought vans thinking it was just going to be a weekend vehicle and things like that, I don't think I would have bought a vintage vehicle if I knew we decided to travel the whole country and live in him. Logistically, on paper, I think it would have been stupid, and there's no way I would have. However, after doing weekend trips and trips in him, we realized it was so doable, and 6 months in, I still feel exactly the same. I think a video like this would have definitely helped me if we were planning on buying purely to live in. As I say, I wouldn't have bought this, but it's so doable, so enjoyable, and we just love it. I think it's definitely something to do, but hopefully this helps you decide.
If you have any questions, or if you can think of any pros and cons of your own that we may have missed, just let us know, and we'll catch you on the next one.